A fever broke along my neck. "I don't mean to be a bad person," I said, and stared at my hands, how they were folded together like hands in prayer. I can't seem to help it. You would think was totally cried out, but tears beaded again along my lids. I do all the wrong things. I tell lies all the time, not to you. Well, I have, but for good reasons, and I hate people. Not just T-Ray, but lots of people. The girls at school, and they haven't done anything to me except ignore me. I hate Willifred Marchant, the poet of Tiburon, and I don't even know her. Sometimes I hate Rosaline because she embarrasses me. And when I first came here, I hated June. Flood of silence now. It rose like water. I heard a roar in my head, rains in my ears. Look at me. Put your hand back on mine. Say something. By now my nose was running along with my eyes. I was sniffling, wiping my cheeks, unable to stop my mouth from spewing out every horrible thing I could drum up about myself, and once I was finished, well, if she could love me then, if she could say, "Lily, you are still a special flower planted on the earth," then maybe I would be able to look in the mirrors in her parlor and see the river glistening in my eyes, flowing on despite the things that had died in it. But all of that's nothing, I said. I was on my feet, needing to go someplace, but there was no place to go. We were on an island, a floating blue island in a pink blue house where I spilled out my guts and then hoped I was tossed out to sea to wait for my punishment. August was looking at me, waiting. I didn't know if I could say it. It was my fault she died. I killed her. I sobbed the words. I sobbed and dropped straight onto my knees on the rug. It was the first time I'd ever said the words to another person, and the sound of them broke open my heart. Probably one or two moments in your whole life you will hear a dark whispering spirit, a voice coming from the center of things. It will have blades for lips and will not stop until it speaks the one secret at the heart of it all. Kneeling on the floor, unable to stop shuddering, I heard it plainly. It said, "You are unlovable, Lily Owens, unlovable. Who could love you? Who in this world could ever love you?" I sank farther down onto my heels, hardly aware of myself mumbling the words out loud. I am unlovable. When I looked up, I saw dust particles floating in the lamplight, August standing, looking down at me. I thought she might try to pull me up to my feet, but instead she knelt beside me and pushed the hair back from my face. "Oh, Lily," she said. "Child." "I accidentally killed her," I said, staring straight into her eyes. "Listen to me now," said August, tilting my chin to her face. "That's a terrible, terrible thing for you to live with, but you're not unlovable. Even if you did accidentally kill her, you are still the most dear, most lovable girl I know. Why, Rosaline loves you. May loved you. It doesn't take a wizard to see Zach loves you. And every one of the daughters loves you. And June, despite her ways, loves you too. It just took her a little while longer because she resented your mother so much." She resented my mother? But why? I said, realizing that June must have known who I was all along too. "Oh, it's complicated, just like June. She couldn't get over me working as a maid in your mother's house." August gave her head a shake. "I know it wasn't fair, but she took it out on Deborah and then on you. But even June came around to loving you, didn't she?" "I guess," I said. Mostly though, I want you to know I love you, just like I loved your mother." August stood up, but I stayed where I was, holding her words inside me. "Give me your hand," she said, reaching down. Getting to my feet, I felt dizzy around the edges, that feeling like you've stood up too fast. All this love coming to me. I didn't know what to do with it. I wanted to say, "I love you too. I love you all." The feeling rose up in me like a column of wind, but when it got to my mouth, it had no voice, no words, just a lot of air and longing. "We both need a little breather," August said. She plodded toward the kitchen. August poured us glasses of ice water from the refrigerator. We took them up to the back porch, where we sat in the porch swing, taking little gulps of coolness and listening to the chains creak. It's surprising how soothing that can be. We hadn't bothered to turn on the overhead light, and that was soothing too, just sitting in the dark. After a few minutes, August said, "Here's what I can't figure out, Lily. How you knew to come here." I pulled the wooden picture of Black Mary from my pocket and handed it to her. "It belonged to my mother," I said. "I found it in the attic the same time I found her photograph." "Oh, my lord," she said. her hand going up to the side of her mouth. "I gave this to your mother not long before she died." She set her water glass on the floor and walked across the porch. I didn't know whether to keep talking, so I waited for her to say something, and when she didn't, I went and stood beside her. She had her lips tight together and her eyes scanning the night. The picture was clutched in her hand, but her hand dangled by her side. It took a full minute for her to pull it up so we could both stare at it. "It has Tiburon SC written on the back of it," I said. August turned it over. "Deborah must have written that." Something close to a smile passed over her face. That would have been just like her. She had an album full of pictures, and she'd write on the back of every single one of them the place it was taken, even if it was her own house. She handed me the picture. I stared at it, letting my fingers move across the word Tiburon. "Who would have thought?" August said. We went and sat in the swing where we rocked back and forth, making little pushes on the floor with our feet. She stared straight ahead. Her slip strap had fallen down to her elbow, and she didn't even notice. June always said that most people bit off more than they could chew, but August chewed more than she bit off. June loved to tease August about the way she pondered things, how one minute she was talking to you and the next she had slipped into a private world where she turned her thoughts over and over, digesting stuff most people would choke on. I wanted to say, "Teach me how to do that. Teach me how to take all of this in." Thunder rumbled over the trees. I thought of my mother's tea parties, tiny sandwiches for a doll's mouth, and it washed me in sadness. Maybe because I would have loved so much to have attended something like that. Maybe because all the sandwiches would have been peanut butter, my mother's favorite, and I wasn't even that crazy about it. I wondered at the poem August had made her learn, whether it had stuck with her after she got married. Had she lain in her bed listening to T. Ray snore, reciting it while she fell asleep, wishing to God she could run away with Robert Frost? I gave a sideways glance at August. I forced my mind back to that moment in her bedroom when she confessed the worst of human things. Upon hearing it, she said, "I love you, just like I loved your mother." "All right then," said August, like we'd stopped talking, like we'd never stopped talking. "The picture explains how you came to Tiburon, but how in the world did you find me?" "That was easy," I said. "We hadn't been here any time before I spotted your Black Madonna honey, and there was the same picture on it as my mother had, the Black Madonna of Bresenchar of Bohemia." "You said that real nice," August told me. "I've been practicing." "Where did you see the honey?" "I was in the Frogman Stew general store on the edge of town. I asked this man in a bow tie where he got it. He's the one who told me where you lived." "That would be Mr. Grady," she shook her head. "I swear it makes me think you were meant to find us." "I was meant to. I didn't have a doubt about it. I just wish I knew where I was meant to end up." I looked down at our laps, how both of us had our hands laying palm side up on top of our thighs, like we were both waiting for something to drop in. "So why don't we talk some more about your mother?" she said. I nodded. Every bone in my body was cracking with the need to talk about her. "Anytime you need to stop and take a break, you just tell me."